Hello people on my phone and welcome to another reading vlog. Today I'm going to be reading the entire Women's Prize for Fiction shortlist. So the 6 books on the shortlist that I'm going to be reading are The Mercy Step by Marcia Hutchinson, Flashlight by Suzanne Choi, Heart the Lover by Lily King, Dominion by Addie E. Kitchens, Kingfisher by Rosie Kelly, and The Correspondent by Virginia Evans. At the time that I'm filming this, I've read all 6 of these books and I had so much fun, so I really hope that you enjoy watching. The first book I started reading was Kingfisher, so I'll see you soon with my thoughts. Hey guys, have I got an update for you? Yes. Have I also finished the first book for this video without giving you any updates prior? Also yes. I've finished reading Kingfisher by Rosie Kelly just a couple of days ago now. I read it over the course of 2 sittings, so I read mostly 130 pages in one night, and then the following 70 pages the next day. I gave it 3.5 stars. I really liked it. It is very Sally Rooney-esque, which I really liked, but I think a lot of people won't. But I did write some notes, so I thought I could share with you some of my thoughts. Like I said, this book is about 200 pages, and the amount of character depth and emotional depth that this book holds is insane. It is incredibly honest, raw, it's very vulnerable. The narrator is incredibly observant. He's almost got this unromanticized reality, except for when he wants to describe something like he does in his literature. There is an awful lot of introspection and meditation because it is literary fiction, but because it is so vulnerable and so honest, there is a lot of detail on the messy relationships that this book encompasses. I don't think that there is a single healthy relationship in this entire book. And this is what I mean when I say that it's Sally Rooney-esque. These characters are all so incredibly flawed and nuanced. I think it's partially the narrator's fault as to why these relationships are just so awful. Also, the people around him just encourage it every single time. It's not healthy for any of them. And on top of these incredibly messy relationships, it really has very nuanced descriptions of grief. Grief is paralleled through so many of the characters and so many of the relationships in this book. And yet again, every single description has something wrong with it. And again, that is the fault of the narrator. It does mean then, I suppose, that there's a lot of psychoanalytical insight on the human condition. Domestic relationships and parental relationships especially are heavily discussed in this book. There's a lot of almost Freudian commentary on how your younger experiences and also how your domestic relationships expand as you get older really influence and change the person that you are into your adulthood. But again, the rest of the characters do not inspire him to be a good person. He may think that they do, and he may think that they're brilliant, but in truth he understands that none of these characters necessarily have his best interest at heart. They have what is best for him to be reflected upon them. The entire thesis of this book is built off the idea of almosts and attempts and this coulds be. It's really, really an interesting depiction of, I don't know, this understanding that your life isn't all that great and everything is an attempt, not necessarily at being better, but just of being. I didn't necessarily annotate it heavily, but I did on this one page. I won't read you the quote because it is somewhat of a spoiler for a lot of the heavier themes of the book. But what I wrote is, with evident anxiety surrounding mortality, there is a parallel to ideas of emotional completion. Even in the face of near potential death, there is no distinct manner or method that will provide true satisfaction. Forever there will be a balancing of life amongst almosts and absolutes, a full word of regret before anticipation can even begin to fall off the tongue. Which, not to toot my own horn or anything, but I think that sounds pretty clever. And really it summarizes this entire point that I've been saying so far. This book is built across this regret and this penultimate regret, this thing that you can recognize before anything is even over. It was such a beautiful read. There are so many amazing quotes throughout. I'm going to be ranking these as I go, so at the moment this is in first place. I'll see you when I start reading the second book of the Women's Prize for Fiction. Other people in my phone. I just got back from a coffee date with a friend that I haven't seen in such a long time and I had so much fun, but I wanted to give you my thoughts on Dominion so far. I'm currently on page 78. I think I'm just about 50% of the way through. I really don't know how to feel about it. It fits into this southern gothic litfic sort of a aesthetic or genre, but it uses this incredibly vulgar language for a reason that I can't explain other than shock value, which I don't really like. It has a lot of good commentary on gender roles and religion, and I'm expecting there to be some kind of a twist that makes all of this intensity kind of round up towards the end. I could even expect some kind of grief or loss, but so far I haven't really got anything about that. It's just a small synopsis. It follows these 2 women who are describing their relationship with this man called Emmanuel or Manny or Wonder Boy. He's really not that wonderful though. Two people narrating are his mother and his girlfriend of sorts, so they have incredibly different perspectives of him. Like I said, it's also got this religious element to it because the father is the reverend, so the mother writes something for the church. So there is some kind of exploration of sin because he's with her, but they're not married. They're not even like officially dating, I don't think. All in all, it's just a bit strange and I'm not quite sure how to feel about it. I was hoping to finish this today, but I think I'm going to do some assignment work and then watch the Bo Burnham Inside documentary this evening because I have to give a presentation on that tomorrow, so I need to kind of like round up my thoughts on that before I give the presentation. But I'll insert some clips of me reading and then the next time you see me, hopefully I will have finished reading this book. Other people on my phone, I've now finished the second book on the women's prize for fiction shortlist, which is Dominion by Addie E. Kitchens. I rated this 2 stars, but I do have my thoughts again, so we can run through what I thought whilst reading this book. One of the most important structural things that this book attempts to deconstruct, I suppose, is the idea of religion and patriarchy and masculinity and how that fits into these themes. It almost looks at these topics as a kind of torture and how it collapses identity within these categories, which is inherently interesting, and the idea of this Southern Gothic religion is inherently interesting, but it really presents masculinity as this godlike figure because male power or male violence is only stopped by male violence. It's this incredibly circular thing throughout the entirety of the novel that male violence is kind of the be-all and end-all of every single interaction. As a result of this patriarchal influence on this little town, it is incredibly fractured. There are these decaying morals and this inherent violence I was talking about. There is just this systemic dysfunctionality that no one seems to be able to overpower, which I feel like if you're gonna write a book about terrible morals and male violence and power in religion, there has to be some kind of commentary on removing this power. When in actual fact, whilst reading this book, all I could think about was this forced simplicity on these topics. There are so many horrific topics in this book, and you should definitely look up trigger warnings because it looks at assault and murder. It does look at these topics, like these horrible topics, from the actions of one of these male characters and almost puts it as a blame on domestic abuse and queerness, which I think is like inherently troubling, but I just don't know how to feel about it because it's simplistic, and then you look deeper and you think it's actually blaming a lot of this male violence on things that actually aren't the root cause of this in the slightest. This man is just insane. I think as well there's this implication that it's difficult to see either the good or the bad in someone that you love depending on your experience with them. One thing that this did make me appreciate though is that there's almost this hidden web underneath this community of femininity, and the women that on the surface seem to really dislike each other for incredibly valid reasons actually are all much more similar than they want to believe. And there isn't this massive building of relationship between women throughout this book, but you slowly begin to realise how much has taken place before this book comes about and before this story is told. Of course, it's told through this perspective of a community, so these women all have these intrinsic links together, and realising throughout reading how similar a lot of them are despite the fact that they wouldn't want to be. I really enjoyed reading that, and I think that was probably one of my favourite takeaways from the book. There was also from both of these women's perspectives this very unflinching honesty and this raw anguish in their language. I know I mentioned before it was incredibly vulgar, and if anything that just got worse throughout the book. I also didn't really like that. I think it was for shock value rather than authentic portrayal, and I don't know, maybe I'm in the wrong for saying that. I could see how it was very good at creating character in this town, but I don't think in terms of narrative perspective it really lended much to the story except for the fact that these events are horrific. But then in the end it was really ironic because this authenticity and this honesty was kind of irrelevant because I felt like the ending, not only was it incredibly rushed in like the last chapter, there were also so many loose ends and things that you didn't really find out answers to. Like one of the main plot points that I was relatively interested in because it looks at femininity more than masculinity, there's kind of not an ending to it, or nothing that was substantial at least. And I feel like now is a good time to say that of course these books have all been not only longlisted for the Women's Prize for Fiction but also shortlisted, so they are incredible books. Dominion currently has a 3.81 star rating on Goodreads out of 5, and obviously I've given it 2, so I've halved that. So some people loved this book. I was looking through a lot of the 5-star reviews and people just praise this book endlessly for its commentary on social issues. I'm not one of those people. So you can just take my review and completely dismiss it if you really liked this book, and that is so fine. But those are all of my thoughts on Dominion. I really wish I liked it. Of course, this means that it's second place in my tier ranking. And I'm gonna start the 3rd book this evening. I'm very excited for it. This is the one that Connie has read. I'm hoping that this means I will like it because I know that she has. I will probably catch you later with some thoughts on that book. Hello people in my phone. I'm reading the 3rd book of the Women's Prize for Fiction shortlist, which is Heart the Lover by Lily King. This one Connie has already read and she enjoyed it. I think she gave it like 3.5 stars. I'm currently on page 60. I've just read like 5 pages and thought, oh, maybe I should give an update so far. I'm really enjoying the prose style. It's really easy to read, but it also is very intellectual at times. It's about a creative writing student, so obviously I'm at university studying literature and creative writing, so it works really well in tandem with my life. Obviously you don't have to apply yourself to the main characters of books, but when it happens, it's quite exciting. So I do fear that this is going to have some quotes about university life and the ephemerality of it and like graduation that are gonna make me cry. But that's half the fun of being a reader. I've got the entire evening dedicated to reading this book. I've got an iced caramel latte-esque drink, and I've got some dark chocolate buttons, and I've got my journal in case there are any quotes that I really like. Also, I bought new flowers yesterday. These are so pretty. These I think are definitely the prettiest flowers that I've bought so far. They're lilies, and then I've got a rose in here from Connie because she got roses, I got lilies, and then we traded one each. So these are really lovely. But yeah, now I'm just gonna keep reading Heart the Lover and I'll update you at some point. I finished it and I cried. This may be crying, but at least I can vlog. I'd give Heart the Lover by Lily King 4 stars. Of course, giving this 4 stars, it means that Heart the Lover is top of my ranking, so this is in 1st place. Because there is this academic setting, there are so many references to like Hamasha and denouement and just the tragic genre as a whole. I knew it was going to be painful, I knew there was going to be some form of grief, and I knew that I was going to cry. Again, because this is set in this academic background, there is this very visceral reality of someone that lives in the margins, both through their writing but also just through their existence. It's also very metafictional in that element because it's split into 3 sections rather than like individual chapters, and the second one goes into second person narrative, and there are also some time skips and like fluctuations between narrative settings. I think that these 3 sections really help to emphasize this progression of life that this book is so clearly about. It looks a lot at the idea of hindsight and making the wrong decisions and the impact that this can have on your life. But because of this, I would say it's a love story because it's got this intense romance, but also it looks very intrinsically at the usage of friendship and how inherent friendship is in love, which leads me to like my 2 critiques of the book and why I wouldn't give it 5 stars. I wanted more, firstly, from this friendly dynamic of the 3 main characters. There was so much opportunity to talk more about them and their interactions. So much of their friendship in the future scenes is built off of these memories of what they lived like as young adults, and I wish we got to see more of that. Granted, I think the first section is the longest. The first section is like 130 pages, the next is like 20 pages, and then the last one maybe also 100. But I really wanted more from this dynamic because the characters were so lovable. Like, they were incredibly real and raw, and they had this perspective of life that isn't romanticized too much, although they are very pretentious, but I kind of love that. Like, I love the secret history. You can't take pretentious characters away from me. But then also, I think the husband was pretty irrelevant in the story. It's mainly about these 3 friends and their grief and their lives and looking at the separation of their adult and their young adult lives. I think that there is almost like a prequel, like a literary fiction prequel to this called Writers and Lovers, which I think is about the main character and her husband. I'm not entirely sure. I would love to read more by Lily King. I think literary fiction, like duologies or series, is such an unusual concept to me. Like, I don't think I've read any. So I would really like to read Writers and Lovers, if that is what that is. Also, I should have said this earlier, today is the 10th of June. The announcement for the winner of the Women's Prize for Fiction shortlist is tomorrow at like 6:30 p.m. I'm not finishing them all before that. I will probably watch and I'm gonna read them regardless and just post this late, so. Hello people in my phone. I've now finished The Correspondent by Virginia Evans. This is my favourite of the list so far. I gave this 4.5 stars. Of course I have my thoughts written in my journal again, so we're gonna go through them. I also can't remember what I said last time, if I gave you any updates on this. It's written in the form of letters, it's an epistolary form. The narrator, Sybil, writes to anyone. The most prominent and recurring characters are probably her brother, her sister-in-law who's her best friend, her neighbour, this male lover, also just strangers and authors and anyone in between. This is such a triumph of a book to write. Maintaining all of these perspectives and having them be so individual to not only the characters but also through what they let Sybil know and how she interprets them. It was incredible to read and to learn who's who. As you're reading, of course, at the beginning, you don't know who the characters are, and I've found myself flipping to the end of the letter, each individual letter, to see who it was sent from, and then flipping back to read it. But it got to about halfway through and I didn't have to do that anymore because I knew their cadence. It's also just a really beautiful read generally. It follows Sybil through what she considers to be her winter of her life, which is essentially just like her last season of life. There's a lot of insight into the thoughts that she's willing to share, especially so late on in her life. She's like in her 70s and 80s throughout the book. Thematically, it really explores hindsight and regret and grief and the weight of life lived and how you express this. There was also a lot of commentary on how you can internalize your experiences and have them impact you even later on in life. Also, it looks at illness narratives and the process of going blind and what you become when something so integral to life is taken from you. It happens very slowly throughout this book, but you look at every single aspect of her life through this illness and also her perspective on it and the people that she does and doesn't share it with. But this is the 4th book that I've been reading. I'm about to go to a cafe and keep reading the 5th book, which is Flashlight by Susan Choi, so I'll get back to you later with my thoughts on that. Hey guys, I'm now 300 pages into Flashlight, so I've only got 200 pages left. Whilst reading this, I'm constantly going between completely bored and completely interested. There is no real in-between. I like that we go between different perspectives, but I wish the chapters were slightly shorter. Because it is relatively intense historical fiction, it's set in the 1960s in Korea and Japan. It is very much built upon these legacies within history. It can be intense to read, but not because of the content itself, just because of the way that it's been written. So it really does have some pros and cons. I'm enjoying it much more than I thought I was going to. I also forgot to say this morning that the winner of the Women's Prize for Fiction shortlist has been announced. It was announced like 2-3 days ago at this point, and it was The Correspondent. I guess I was right for putting that first in my ranking. Hello people in my phone and welcome home. I've got this massive pile of books behind me, which all of the books, actually that's not all of the books that I brought home with me from university, but it's so fine. I finished Flashlight, so I can ignore that. I gave this 3 stars, so I think that my ranking at the moment is firstly The Correspondent, Heart the Lover, Kingfisher, Flashlight, Dominion. I've again got my notes in my journal, so we can go over those. There's not very many, so I apologise. I'm also not sure if I gave a synopsis of Flashlight when I started reading it. This begins with this girl called Louisa, and she's on the beach with her father. She's like really young actually, and he drowns basically like in the first page. So this is historical fiction. It's set very globally, but it's set primarily between Japan and Korea. And there's also a bit of time in like America, I think, as well. It looks a lot at missing people and the reunification of the 2 Koreas, so it is very intense in terms of content. And I think that these topics really do rationalise how unlikable a lot of these characters were. There wasn't really anyone that really drew me to them. I think Louisa at the very start, who's the daughter, she was nice. And then her mother had a son before she was born called Tobias, and he was very quirky. But aside from that, everyone was just a bit I don't know, didn't really connect with them at all. I think it's interesting that this book is called Flashlight because with these topics, it looks a lot at the illuminization of these things. It's 500 pages long. It's the longest book on the Women's Prize for Fiction shortlist. It also took me ages to read, which kind of lowers my ranking anyway. The main plot of this book didn't get mentioned until 350 pages in, because I remember, I think I filmed and said, something's just happened, this is crazy. That was the plot. Like, that wasn't a plot twist, that was the plot starting. Everything after that was also very intense at that point in terms of the historical context, but much more interesting to read about. I would recommend it. It's really good historical fiction. It depends on the person, which I guess is books anyway. But it does mean that now I've only got one book left of the Women's Prize for Fiction shortlist. At the time I'm filming this, the announcement has been out for weeks, but I'm still enjoying reading them. But the next time I see you, I will hopefully have started to read that. Hey guys, I've now started the final book of the Women's Prize for Fiction shortlist, The Mercy Step. I'm not going to give you many thoughts because it's currently the hottest day of the year so far in the UK. I think when there was the last heat wave, I was in Rome, so it doesn't count to me. I'm 78 pages in, and I'm reading this after Connie, so it's really fun that we can annotate it. Like, I can reply to what she's saying. Like on this one, she gave me a question so I could answer it. Even though it is the hottest day, I think I'm going to go sit outside for an hour, see how much I can read, and then I'm going to spend the rest of the day sat in my room editing this vlog in front of a fan. I will see you later, probably when I'm outside. Hello people on my phone, I finished reading The Mercy Step, which is the final book of the Women's Prize for Fiction shortlist. I gave The Mercy Step 3.75 stars. I really enjoyed it. It was so interesting. Connie still needs to finish reading it. She's got just under 100 pages, I think. Like usual, I've got my thoughts in my journal so we can go through those. The Mercy Step has a really intriguing plotline to it. It's not so much of a distinct plot as it is a character study, but I think it really works for this book in particular. It begins with our main character called Mercy being born. It starts in the womb and then the entire book spans just over a decade. It's really interesting that we have this childhood perspective because we follow her thoughts and her actions when she's 2 and younger. There is this balancing between not understanding and also this very investigative curiosity. And then alongside this, there's this implication that books can only learn so much because we're following in her thoughts, we're looking at how much she can pick up on just from being around people. I also thought that because of this, it was really interesting that throughout she's, of course, aging physically, but also mentally she's becoming her own individual person. She feels this thread between her and her mother, which is the umbilical cord, but it stretches thinner throughout the book and she becomes more individualized. And because of that, this book really looks at the reality of being a young black girl in England in the 60s and in the 70s. And then I have a list of themes because I think that some things could be triggering, so I think it'd be good to look up trigger warnings before you read if this is one that you're interested in. So thematically, it's got the access to third spaces, religious psychosis, gender, race, class, sexual violence, mortality, and grief. Also looks at the idea of mental frameworks and this progression of thinking. Of course, as she is exposed to all of these themes so incredibly young and she has this somehow heightened sense of what's going on around her. It was honestly, I think the only book I've ever read from this perspective before. But that does mean that this is now the end of my Women's Prize for Fiction vlog. In terms of my final ranking, we have The Correspondent with 4.5 stars, Heart the Lover with 4 stars, The Mercy Step with 3.75, Kingfisher with 3.5, Flashlight with 3, and then Dominion with 2. Overall, I would have been happy if any of these books had won the shortlist prize. I am happy it was The Correspondent because that is my number 1. I had so much fun reading all of these books. If you read any of these books or they're on your TBR, then please let me know because I'd love to hear your thoughts and talk about them. But for now, thank you so much for watching and I'll see you in my next reading vlog.